You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, on Twitter at Justin Lonero, along with my co-host, Bob Harris, at Football Diehard. Executive producer, Kyle Dvorchak, on the line tonight at FF. Kyle the Kid, we have a special guest on tonight, Matt Harmon, on Twitter at Matt Harmon _BYB, which stands for Backyard Banter. Mr. Harris, what's going on in Albuquerque, New Mexico tonight?
The same old thing, man. We're making lots of football news and, big kind of newsy day with all kinds of stuff going on. So it's kind of nice to chill back and find out. And first of all, congratulate Matt Harmon for the big move to Yahoo Fantasy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Big deal there. Moves from NFL.com and NFL Network over there to another huge company who might be better use his services. And look, I've been following your career for quite some time now, Matt. The rise has been meteoric, and much deserved. And so the big breakthrough thing, though, the reception perception piece, for people out there who maybe somehow have not heard of this, tell us about it.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the well wishes, guys. And yeah, it's awesome to be at Yahoo. It's awesome to be at a company that I think is really gonna, like you said, Bob, make use of what I can do. I think there's a lot that we're going to enjoy coming out from me and Yahoo together. And part of that is going to be a little bit of reception perception, which hopefully we'll be able to get that rolling sometime here in the next couple of weeks before the season kicks off, and maybe even a little bit during the season. And if you're unfamiliar with perception, it's basically it's a methodology that I developed to evaluate the wide receiver position. What I do is I go in over an 8-game sample for NFL players and 6-game sample for college players, and I basically chart out every route that they run, how often they got open on each route, what type of routes they run most often, what type of coverages they're most successful against. It's really kind of like a way to evaluate route running. We hear all the time, like, oh, this guy's from scouts or whatever. Like, this guy's a good route runner. He grades a 7 out of 10. Like, I don't really know what that means. So what I wanted to do is go in and quantify everything there. So, it's basically just kind of what I'm watching on tape and seeing. It's just that kind of broken down into a rubric so that you compare across seasons, across between two different players, across one player for multiple years. So that's kind of the elevator pitch of it.
Good stuff there, Matt. Listen, possibly what the fans want to know most is, how do you leverage these findings for fantasy purposes?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different applications that you can make with reception perception. Obviously, one that I think everybody knows about was identifying a player like Allen Robinson before he broke out. Back in the 2015 season, I put out that article showing that he was posting success rates on each individual routes and across multiple coverages that were very indicative of future NFL star. I also think there's several examples of you can use it for kind of these underproducing veterans, whether you're not sure whether it's an injury situation or a quarterback that they don't fit with. An example of that this year is like a guy like Randall Cobb, who has struggled with injuries in the past, and his reception perception results are quite poor following what was a great 2014 season. Mm-hmm. Now this past year, obviously he had some success with Rodgers in the lineup, but spent most of the year dealing with the Brett Hundley anchor. But you notice in his reception perception, he's still getting open at rates that look much more like that 2014 season. So he's a guy you can kind of identify as a value. You can also kind of help see what kind of a player the wide receiver is, because so much of these guys operate in such different ways. What a guy like Cooper Kupp is doing is entirely different from a guy like Brandon Cooks on his own team. You can see you've got players like Juju Smith-Schuster are in very specialized roles, and then you can take that as good or bad for fantasy depending on the volume. So it's not a skeleton key. There's no such thing as the skeleton key in fantasy, like the one number to rule them all. But it is a helpful piece of the puzzle that I think for information-crazed fantasy owners who just want to understand what these guys are doing and how they can best deploy them in their lineup, it's just another way to get an edge doing that.
Right. I think a lot of us have learned, just is exactly what you said. What exactly is going on, how this benefits us as fantasy owners. I know the last 2 years, and by the way, everyone run out and get the Fantasy Football Cheat Sheets magazine. Matt has an article in there this year about, based on the reception perception. But I love the piece you did last year about the range of possible outcomes in a given situation. Is that something that came from this, doing the reception perception pieces?
I think it's more so, it's a little bit of that, and I do think that this can help you kind of decide that range of outcomes, Bob. It's a good way of applying this. A player like, Sammy Watkins this year, I think has kind of a wide range of outcomes, and you can really help kind of understand him more based on his perception, what type of roles he's inhabited, how this year in Kansas City it might be different. You can help identify that range a little bit more. But honestly, I think that idea came from more just the year in, year out grind of, trying to rank players for fantasy, which I think is a really unhelpful exercise, just putting guys into, a 1 through 50 list and being like, well, I have this guy at 39 and this guy at 40, so I better take the guy at 39. That's not really a helpful way to construct the lineup that you're going to have to win week by week with in the season. I think that, we focus so much on the draft as an industry, and, to peel back the curtain, working for two mega corporations here in the last, several years, that's where most of the money comes in. It's during drafts and sponsorships and everything. But we also forget when we're drafting these teams that we're going to have to construct them in ways that we can beat a different opponent with different matchups on a week by week basis. And that's where I think helping imagine that range of outcomes is helpful, with building players who maybe some of them have high floor range of outcomes, but maybe not that high ceiling. But other guys, you can bake in a little bit more volatility if you are able to insulate them with some safer players.
You are outside of Willie Snead, who's another one of your boys.
Hey, that's 70 catches for Baltimore this year, Willie Snead.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know about that, but I do think that Ravens offense, I've been doing my projections this past week, and, you got the Flacco thing, which is a big thing. But there are so many pieces of that offense that I do think are really interesting. I mean, John Brown, another one of my boys, they've kind of got Michael Crabtree, another perception guy. They do have some interesting receivers there. And I think that Snead could be an interesting little value in PPR leagues if he's healthy. He was really on a good track, before going to New Orleans, or before going to the suspension last year. But I'm sorry, I jumped in there. We mentioned Snead and I got excited.
No, Joe Flacco was certainly interesting. I can remember you telling me that, Demaryius Thomas didn't chart well several years ago. Is my memory serve me correct?
That's an important thing to remember with these data points is that, just because somebody doesn't necessarily have a high success rate versus man coverage or something like that, that doesn't mean that they're bad players. I mean, it would be asinine to argue that Demaryius Thomas isn't good, or somebody like Brandon Cooks, who's another player that, doesn't beat man coverage at the same rate of some of these other guys who are as productive as him, that they're bad players. That would be insane. You would that's a bad take. But it does help you understand kind of, again, that range of outcomes a little bit more, or what they really thrive at. Not everybody is a great route runner or a great separator on a route basis, but a guy like Brandon Cooks, great vertical threat and everything like that, where Demaryius Thomas is, in his peak years, was just a uber athlete. Mm-hmm. Now we've seen Thomas, he's a guy that, back, like you mentioned, that 2014 season, not great numbers across the board. We've seen Thomas develop in several areas that he's kind of changed to be more of that boundary possession receiver as he's aged and lost some of that physical ability. And that's the fun part about tracking these guys throughout their career. You see how they evolve.
I'm curious, as you talked about this, and by the way, if my investment in Crabtree were any greater, my entire retirement would hinge on it. So, hoping that all works out well for everybody involved. But how much, look, you grade these guys based on what they have done. How much do you look forward and project perhaps the scheme and what kind of role that's going to play in that range of outcomes for a given player?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's why I like to, chart all the routes, watch the film like that, but also go in and project each and every offense, because I think it's a good way to just kind of help keep you honest, using the last 3 years or so of pace data by, teams' run percentage versus pass percentage, and then try to divvy up the targets that way. it can really help you kind of identify those guys who maybe don't have that high range that you think they do based on their ability. You know, we're so easy to get caught up in emotions and, you know, get ourselves obsessed with these guys that pop on film or pop when we watch games. But then sometimes when you go project the offense and, you know, the raw targets just aren't there. Great example that last year was Terrell Pryor. Like, I mean, right. I thought he was a talented receiver based on watching him. But then when you went and just projected Washington's offense, it just wasn't there, you know, for him to get the volume that he needed to be, you know, a guy who was going in like the third round of fantasy drafts. That was a guy who was clearly off, just, you know, not based on any sort of advanced scouting, just pretty much trying to divvy up that offense and just seeing that the volume just really wasn't there. And even before he got hurt, you know, he was a pretty big fantasy disappointment last year.
Who are some players who have charted surprisingly well over the years, Mr. Harmon?
It's a good question. A guy like Rashard Matthews, I think, is somebody that he pops in different ways. This past year was a really good year. I was definitely surprised by that. Kenny Stills, another guy that I think people would you know, see he's that deep threat, no doubt, but he also is a really good guy that wins 50-50 balls. And I think he's exciting this year. He's definitely a top sleeper to me. Thinking of some other guys across multiple seasons, Emmanuel Sanders has always been a guy that's really grabbed my eye. You know, someone that I think he's in that mold of the sort of the Antonio Brown light type of guys, you know, a perimeter receiver who's smaller but runs such great routes. And then guys, you know, that followers of the series for years like Tyler Lockett and Sterling Shepard are players that, you know, I think that, you know, this year, especially for Lockett is a big year. I do think he could get the volume. I know you're laughing at me because it's like every year it's this is the year, but this could really be the year. So he's somebody that's out there. And then this year, a guy that, you know, surprisingly well for me that, you know, I haven't put his results out yet, but it's kind of something I'm waiting for the next couple of weeks. Keelan Cole from the Jaguars, you know, is somebody that I think, you know, we should really be paying attention to as kind of maybe a surprise player. I don't know how much is going to matter for fantasy because of just the volume of that offense, but he's definitely something I'm high on.
Right, and you know, there's always guys we're always high on. There's also guys that we're not as keen on. Anybody in particular you're fading heading into this season at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think I'm out on Juju Smith-Schuster where he's going in drafts. Not because I don't like the player.
Right.
I think he's in such a good position for fantasy or for success, really, you know, as that big slot receiver. But the fact that they have, you know, an all-world talent in Antonio Brown, who, you know, you've got to be projecting to be one of the league leaders in targets. We drafted a deep threat in James Washington, who I think could give them what they wanted out of Martavis Bryant last year, but didn't get. He's somebody I really like coming out of the draft, and they have a running back who is pretty much a shoo-in for 90 to 100 targets. When I go in and project the Steelers offense out, it's tough to get him to the volume that he's going to need to succeed for a second year in a row, going as like the 19th receiver off the board. You know, in that fourth round range, there's guys like Larry Fitzgerald's around there, maybe a little bit higher, Amari Cooper, Allen Robinson, you know, guys that I think have much higher target ceilings than Juju does. You know, he's going to have to maintain an incredible yards per target, an incredible catch rate, to succeed this year on low volume. And those things is typically, unless you're just a true superstar, it's tough to roll those over year after year. He's somebody that I haven't found on any of my teams this year.
I tend to agree in terms of Juju there. He's kind of in that range where you're paying somewhat of a premium at this point, so maybe go with somebody a little bit, you know. He's on the fringe. In fact, I tweeted something out a little earlier in reference to Juju with a question mark next to him. If you were to draft pound running backs early, you know, rounds 3 and 4, I think players like Tate and Landry and then Juju kind of fell into that mix. And kind of like, I got that feeling. Listen, can the reception perception targets, I was giggling because you mentioned Allen Robinson, who's been your boy for years, and Tyler Lockett. Can they rebound this year? You mentioned you think that this is the year for Lockett. This is going to be it. Do you see the same thing for Allen Robinson where he's in Chicago now?
Yeah, I think Robinson's in a good spot. It's mostly about health for him.
Sure.
The fact he's supposedly healthy going into training camp is good news. I mean, that whole offense is really intriguing. I think that they'll be able to use him a little bit better than he was used in Jacksonville, where he was pretty much just a straight, you know, number one receiver, lines up at X all the time, faces a bunch of tight window targets, a bunch of press coverage. Like, I think we'll see Nagy really create more space for him. That's something that he was great at doing with his Chiefs offenses. You know, those receivers consistently were in space. I think we'll see Robinson do that a little bit more. And that just shows, you know, that's something like league-wide with reception perception. We've seen these guys who are put away from press coverage, are moved around to the flanker position of that big slot receiver. They see more highly efficient targets. So that's something I think I'm excited about Robinson there. I do think he's an okay wide receiver too, where he's going in drafts. And with Tyler Lockett, like, I still think he's good. By the way, I got to meet him a couple weeks ago at a shoot with Yahoo. One of the most captivating personalities, like stunningly, that I've ever interacted with in terms of a football player. He was incredible. But on the field, it was funny too, because like we go into this meeting, you know, this production meeting, and we're gonna have guys there like Drew Brees, Odell Beckham, you know, the studs of the studs,
right.
Stephon Diggs.
You're like, where's Lockett?
And the producer, you know, this is like my third day there. The producers are all like, who the hell is this guy? Like, who's this bum? Like, it's, you know, one of these things don't look like the other. And I'm just like, I'm going to stay quiet. And he ended up stealing the show, man. I'm telling you, great stuff. Like, it was, and everybody agreed too. They were like, wow, that guy. I'm like, see, I told you, he's good. But anyways, on the field, like, I think Lockett still showed pretty well as a route runner last year. I think he should be more closer to 100% this year, coming off a broken leg from the 2016 end of the season. And also this year, like, there's just a lot of volume up for grabs on a Seattle team that there's no way they can be as run heavy as they want to be with kind of a shaky defense over there. They're, you know, doing projections for them. It's tough to not slot Lockett in that 18 to 20% target range. And at that point, then you're looking at maybe, you know, 70 catches, 900 yards, something like that from a guy that you're getting, you know, dirt cheap in drafts.
All right, Matt Harmon, we're going to let you get out of here. I have a couple, you know, I just want to say, you know, again, I've followed you for quite some time. We share some of the same health journey as do Justin and I, by the way. One day we'll have to all get together and do a pod just about that, but great admirer of yours. Love seeing you make the most of it and cash in on the great potential you have. It's a fantastic thing. Before you go, tell the listeners where they can find you now and all your reception perception data. Where's the place to look all in one spot?
Well, thank you. I appreciate I mean, what you guys have both done in your own personal lives and your own health journey is incredible too. And it's awesome to share an industry with both of you. And I think that it's just really cool that we can all be involved in each other's lives, you know, like that.
The golden age. Sorry to cut you off. Bloom said that, who did the intro, who's Bob's nephew, and he's kind of like he's been like a father figure to you industry wide. I hate to cut you off because I could talk to you all night long.
No, I mean, you're right. It's like, it's the family tree, you know, Sigmund is Bob's nephew as I am Sigmund's son. And, you know, it's right. But that's what's cool about this industry. I remember telling, you know, it's like a Sigmund story. Like, I remember telling my friends this was before I worked, this was before the 2014 season. So this was before NFL.com. I just started football, guys, like, you know, talking to Sig, like, on the phone and stuff, and like Matt Waldman. And like, I remember telling my college friends at this like barbecue thing we had, you know, that summer, I was like, guys, I mean, I really want to make it in this business, and it's so cool that like I'm already like getting to talk to these guys that like I've followed forever. Like, in what other industry do you get to do that? And then on top of that, we all become like, you know, brothers and tight friends, and that's what's so cool about this. So yeah. But to get back to selling content, if you go to receptionperception.com, there's a link to purchase the Fantasy Footballer's Ultimate Draft Kit, where you can get access to all the reception perception metrics from this past season, all my evaluations for these guys going into 2018. And it stays updated too with not only all the information that the fantasy footballers are putting in there, you know, with their rankings, projections, and all that sort of stuff as it develops. I'm also going to be adding some guys, you know, these Keelan Cole, Josh Doxson, some of these later round sleepers that we're going to be talking about as training camp rolls along. I'll be adding their reception perception profiles as it goes. So that's the best way to get a hold of that.
Cool. This was a lot of fun, man. Appreciate you. I don't know if you're on a surfboard tonight or whatever, but you and Charlie are doing big things in Southern California, and I'm happy you relocated. You know, you deserve the best, man. I went on Backyard Banter, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and had a heart-to-heart with you. We're looking at each other. And it's you're one of the best. And like Bob said, to watch your journey, I think gives people hope. I mean, you're obviously young. Kyle is very young, still at Ohio State, right, Kyle? You're still enrolled.
Yeah, I can't drive yet. I got my temps. I'm working on it.
Well, to be fair, I can't drive either. So,
So it's a story of, you know, like you said, Matt, you're shooting the shit with your friends at a barbecue. You converse with these people via Twitter. You know, and actually, I remember when you worked with Sal at why am I drawing a blank? At Sal's old website, you went from there to Sportable to Football Guys, and then you drove from Virginia with Charlie, 3,000 miles or a little less than that, and to LA, and now that's where you reside now. Brad Evans on the show is a Yahoo guy, hell of a personality he is. So there's a good crowd over there, and they got a gem in you, kid.
Hey man, I'm happy to be here. It's a blast, and thank you guys for having me on. Yeah, I could shoot it with you guys all night. So really appreciate the time, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Best of luck, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, I'll see you guys later.
Thanks for stopping by, Matt.
Appreciate it.
You guys ready to move into our fantasy football road trip, stopping at the AFC North today?
I'm not only ready, I demand it. Immediately. Go.
Okay. First stop in somewhere, it's like Annapolis, the other one's Baltimore, the Ravens. The Ravens, would you rather take Joe Flacco in redraft or Lamar Jackson? Bob, go ahead.
I would have to be, so I'm going to confess, I've taken some Joe Flacco. I don't think you can draft, I mean, you know, if you draft either of those guys, you're basically saying I kind of got to go 3 deep at the onesie position, and maybe your roster, you know, the league settings are such that that's not a horrible thing. If that's the case, you know, I'm not averse to throwing a last pick at Lamar Jackson. Just, you know, be ready to bail on him if it's not happening. I think Joe Flacco is correct. If they're winning, he's staying on the field. Maybe maybe he loses some snaps at the special packages. You know, but if they're losing, you're going to see Jackson. To me, they're, you know, both of them are waiver wire guys, you know, the not guys I'm looking to draft. But I have to confess, I have been forced to go Flacco. But those are basically in Superflex leagues. I think that's about the only place I have any shares.
Yeah.
And Lamar Jackson, of course, in Dynasty. But redraft, I'm backing away from both if at all possible.
We talk about, I feel like Lamar Jackson comes up every show, every single show. But
no, it's Patrick Mahomes that comes up every show.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's the best quarterback, Patrick Mahomes.
That's right. But like I said, there's not a ton of allure with Joe Flacco at this point. But we just finished, a lot of us just finished up the Scott Fish Bowl. And I think a guy like Flacco has a purpose and a format like that.
I think I might have Flacco in the mail.
I have AJ McCarron and Sam Bradford too, but he's not, you know, he is what he is at this point. I think he's 15 to 18 touchdowns and he's going to throw 13 picks, but he has some value. And we're all interested to see what the hell Lamar Jackson his future serves. I think he's going to be a special talent. And like you said, week in, week out, Bob, if Joe Flacco struggles, we're going to see Lamar Jackson sooner than later.
All right, moving on to the receivers Joe Flacco will be throwing to. Jeremy Maclin and Mike Wallace vacate 174 targets, and they bring in Michael Crabtree seemingly as the primary receiver to replace these. Bob, how many of these targets do you think he replaces, and at what point does he become a value? Or at how many of those targets does it take for him to become a value on the Ravens?
He's a value to me going in. Look, I mean, we talked about some of these receivers, you know, with Matt, guys that we're looking at late, the Tyler Lockett's of the world. Look, when we get that late in draft, I'm looking for wide receiver ones. You know, I'm looking for opportunities still. And I think, you know, it's like in NFL 10s, I'm just checking the right now. I mean, Crabtree is risen noticeably, but you can still get him in the 6th round or early 6th round. I think that's a fair price for a wide receiver one and a guy who has recently played as well as he has. He's had issues at times, but I think he's in a good spot. The leader of a rebuilt receiving room. Still don't know what I expect from John Brown in terms of health. He claims the issues from the past. It was, you know, both the sickle cell trait that caused some muscle issues, but he also had a cyst on his back that was causing him a lot of grief. They removed that, and, you know, if he's healthy, we know what he is. He's very fast, and speed kills in the NFL. Willie Snead also has demonstrated, had one good year. I don't know if that carries over or not. He's capable. I don't know if Joe Flacco or this offense is capable of fueling all three, though. So for me, I'm sticking with Crabtree, and I think the price is not bad.
No, not at all. All the eyes have been on Amari Cooper over the last couple seasons. Michael Crabtree, polished. I watched quite a bit of him at Texas Tech. Of course, the Niners drafted him, but he finished the last 3 seasons in Oakland as the top target getter. So I tend to agree. He's going to be one of these names. I think he fits with Joe Flacco's capabilities at this point. He's going to see a lot of stuff underneath. But 2015, 2016, this was an 85 reception wide out. There's not a lot of fighting for targets there. You mentioned John Brown issues, health issues. We know what his role was intended to be in Arizona. Willie Snead, who Mr. Harmon was very keen on. I don't think there's enough scratch to go around, and I think that Michael Crabtree comes into 2018 as a bona fide one wide receiver. He's 31 years old. We know who he is at this point. Derek Carr is not Joe Montana, but he was very efficient in Oakland. So, and the cost, Bob, opportunity, Michael Crabtree. I think Crabtree falls in that category where if you're gonna grab 2 stud wide running backs early, I think Crabtree's a guy you're going to be comfortable pretty much every week. He's not going to have well over 1,000 yards or anything, but I think he can definitely have 75 to 80 receptions, 900 yards, and be fine.
Bob, Crabtree can't take all of those 174 vacated targets. So, are you of the opinion, like Justin, that it might just be an ugly field of 3 receivers, none of whom break out? Or do you see John Brown, Willie Snead, even Chris Moore breaking out, or possibly a tight end, Hayden Hurst?
Not a fan of the rookie tight ends. I suppose anything's possible. We've seen it there before.
What about the 25-year-old ones?
No, not that obvious. Well, look, if anyone is going to, it would be one of the older ones. Max Williams still looking for his breakout, but he was very young. So, it could go either way. Look, I'm not eager to have any of these guys in redrafts. I think I'll wait till the season. Keep them on. I'm not going to shy away if the waiver wire demands that they be on a team. I'm not going to shy away if daily lineups require the pricing and matchup. Say, hey, this is happening, and I see some tangible evidence of it. As we get closer to the season, but beyond that, not investing. So I'm thinking Michael Crabtree needs about 150 of those targets.
This is a team, when you look at the Ravens and what they did in the draft, they're desperate for playmakers. They drafted Hayden Hurst. They drafted Mark Andrews round 3 out of Oklahoma, and they drafted 2 wide receivers rounds 4 and 5. So they're looking for some answers, and I think it's going to be a flat offense, but they're one of these teams where you look at and they're usually in the hunt. They have a sound running game. We'll talk about that soon. But to me, Michael Crabtree just jumps off the sheet, whether it's these rookies they drafted or John Brown, Willie Snead, Chris Moore right now. And I certainly agree with you, Bob, that perfect draft spot. He is inching up in ADP, but I'm comfortable in his role, and I think he's going to be a target hog in Baltimore.
Justin, we've talked about it before, so you can feel free to keep it short, but where does Alex Collins fall in your running back rankings? And maybe more importantly, who do you see as the backup to own, especially in best balls where you've got deep rosters?
Alex Collins is a top 25 running back. One of these guys that Seattle missed on, but like he showed us last season, he can withstand volume, and I think that's what we want. Whether the game scripts are going to be conducive to Collins, I don't know. 200 carries. I think he'll kiss close to 1,000 yards, 6 to 7 touchdowns. What's interesting about, Kenneth Dixon did not play last year. You have Buck Allen, who's, I think, can catch 50. So there's your question there, and you can flip a coin. I think Buck Allen has a role in this offense. Kenneth Dixon did not play last year. So if he's healthy, some will say that he's the better pass catcher, but how do you push Buck Allen aside given what he's proven? So from a volume standpoint, Alex Collins is going to probably get upwards around 250 carries. I don't know that he'll have 50 receptions. I don't think that's, the intention of how they're going to use him. So it's anybody's guess at this point. It's only July, Kyle, but it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. If I were to guess right now, I think it's Buck Allen.
I would agree with that. Kenneth Dixon, the best ability is availability. He has not been available. Whether it's injury, suspension, whatever. It's always something with him. So, and maybe that changes. There's a reason he's still there, right? They obviously think something of him despite all the trouble he's had getting on the field. I just say, Collins didn't become the full-time starter until week 6 last year. Had 212 carries at that. Was 11th in the NFL in rushing. And only had 15 or more carries in 8 games. I think maybe that changes a little bit. I'm not eagerly drafting Buck Allen. I think he is a guy that you can maybe throw a best ball flyer at. There may be a week that he shows up, and that's reasonable enough in best ball when you're drafting down at the bottom end of the draft. So I'm not against that. Dixon, I need to see something before I start investing.
All right, I think that can bring us to a close on the Ravens, moving to Cincinnati with the Bengals. What do you think, Bob, is Joe Mixon's ceiling? Because we've seen the volume, but in terms of scoring, touchdowns, yards, what do you think is his ceiling, and how much is that cut down by Giovanni Bernard taking away from his receiving work?
I don't know that it's hugely cut down. A lot of this is going to depend on how successful he is. The thing I look at is, what were the struggles based on last year? A lot of it was miserable offensive line play. Mm-hmm. The Bengals wisely, made an effort to turn that around. They got Cordy Glenn. If he's healthy, he makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. They drafted Billy Payne, the center, in the first round. He will help as well. So I do think they've taken steps to make him, to help him do what he needs to do. He's showing up lighter this year. Some of these guys that we've seen, Leonard Fournette also, looking to be more explosive. I think the thing that I want to watch for is we heard Bill Lazor took over as offensive coordinator last year early on, but, this offseason he's truly changing the offense. It's going to be a different scheme than we saw, even with him calling plays down the stretch last year. It's new verbiage. It's, everyone's going to do different things. So, I think Mixon is a solid value. Look, we know how the turnover can be at running back. I think he has the talent to be a running back 1 in fantasy. Yep. But some of this is going to have to depend on how this offense plays out and how that offensive line gets together. But I think as an upside play, if you go wide receiver early, I think you could do a hell of a lot worse than him as a running back 1 if you follow that course.
Justin, in the past 2 years, Tyler Eifert has started just 2 games. In his 5-year career, he has really 1 fantasy-relevant season, and it was fueled by 13 touchdowns on just 615 yards, which is good for a tight end, but the 13 touchdowns is really where the fantasy production comes from. Do you think as a community we're buying too heavily into 1 good season, or are you taking him at the injury discount?
No. He's he's only played 39 of possible 80 games over the course of his career. Some of these players have a propensity to get hurt, and he's one of them. I get the 13 touchdowns in 2015, but 2015 seems like ages ago. And in terms of the NFL, it's a game of youth. He's 27. They have another tight end in Tyler Kroft. There's some appeal there. Some scouts, have said nice things about him. Bob's boy, John Ross, is going to be back. Tyler Eifert falls into that sea of mediocrity, and it's such a deep sea where, you'll see him as a top 12 tight end, but he seems like an immense liability at this point. When you stick him in that Jack Doyle range, and after the Trey Burtons of the world, then you have names like Tyler Eifert, and he's a monumental liability. So I'm much more comfortable diving deeper into that sea of the mediocrity and grabbing the Kittles and the Charles Clays and maybe even the Austin Hoopers of the world. So he's a fade for me. He's a fade for me. If he's free, then I'll take him because of what he did in 2015. But he's just one of these players, Bob, where he cannot stay on the field. I know that he has a little bit of a rapport with Andy Dalton, but he missed 8 games in 2016.
Let me just start correcting a few of the things for the record. I don't even know who John Ross is, for first things. But beyond that, other than he was a first-round pick, I don't think I've ever had a single share of John Ross. But in terms of Eifert, I think the issues are baked into the cake, right? The pricing is right. If you're looking to draft a guy with upside, and again, maybe it does force you to go 3 deep at a onesie position. Maybe that third guy is Tyler Kroft, who turns out the tight end has been pretty much something that Andy Dalton looks to. And I know you're knocking the touchdowns, but he missed 3 games in 2015, still led the tight ends in the league with 13 touchdowns, missed 8 games in 2016. still scored 5 touchdowns, ranked 7th in fantasy at the position in fantasy points per game. So yes, absolutely durability is a major concern, but you can do things to make it, maybe mitigate the circumstances, and that's what a draft is for.
Yeah.
The price for me, the price is right. I mean, You can get him well in the double-digit rounds. I think the upside for me is worth a gamble because it's really not that much of a gamble in the 12th round.
That's true. And there's going to be weeks, of course, we're going to talk DFS during the season.
Right.
The show's sponsored by DraftKings, and I think we'll have some Andy Dalton, Tyler Eifert stacks. But, it's a long off season. And I think you're right. I mean, the price is right. And if there's a lot of skepticism, rightfully so, at this point, given his injury history. But like you said, Dalton does like his tight ends. And if you're going to pay, well, you're not paying much, so you're getting upside for free. And like you said, he missed 3 games in 2015.
And I should qualify. I tend to be injury agnostic. I profess it. Football's a tough game. There are collisions. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have to look at someone's history and take it into account. But as I said, I think that's baked into the cake. And everybody out there who is invested in or wants to invest in John Ross, you're all welcome for me ensuring that he has a great rebound season by claiming I've never heard of him.
Moving on to a receiver that we actually want to talk about on this podcast, do you think, Bob, that we'll ever see vintage A.J. Green again, or is he, past his prime and it's closer to 1,000 yards and maybe not quite getting to double-digit touchdowns anymore?
I just think the whole offense needs to work for him, and Andy Dalton. Look, and we've got to, acknowledge the elephant in the room is, you don't know if it's going to be the red rifle or the redheaded stepchild that shows up at quarterback on any given weekend, and unless it's a primetime game when you know that Dalton is probably not going to show up. No, that's been part of the problem is, and some of that for Dalton has been protection. Certainly last year that was an issue. So yeah, I think A.J. Green is still capable of playing at a very high level. I think he's still A.J. Green. I just think circumstances need to work a little more in his favor, and perhaps with some adjustments to the offense, including a stronger rushing attack, some of that can come to fruition for him. So I do think he's a reasonable value where he's going right now. I think the price has fallen to the point where I go, oh, okay.
Justin, speaking of Andy Dalton, our last player we have for the Bengals, I've got a simple question for you. Maybe not garbage or totally hot garbage?
I mean, similar to you mentioned Joe Flacco. I mean, I think in 2 quarterback leagues, you're going to have some Dalton. Look, it's a beefed up offensive line, like Bob mentions every week. When you talk about A.J. Green and you talk about a sound running game with Joe Mixon and potentially a healthy Tyler Eifert and maybe a burner in John Ross being there, you have some pretty big pieces and interesting pieces to that equation. So I don't gravitate necessarily towards Andy Dalton, but the talent around him is good enough where, look, Andy Dalton showed us he can throw 25 touchdowns, and that's fine. That seems to be a number where a lot of these quarterbacks are at. So 2 quarterback leagues, I'll have him. And there's going to be weeks in DFS where you're going to have, A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, stacks for certain. Do I love him? No. Was he in the top 25? Absolutely.
I think the best thing you could say about probably Andy Dalton is it's going to take an injury to get him out of the lineup. I mean, there's no, he's kind of like the Eli Manning, or you're one of those guys, if you're drafting quarterbacks late and you've waited until the very end, you get a guy that is going to be on the field, has some weapons around him, and see, and there has been, moments of success. You look at 2013, the 33 touchdown passes, the 25 in 2015. So, and last year again. So, I mean, it's in 27, I think, what was it? 2012. Yeah. So it's not like, he's not capable. It'd be nice if he showed up all the time.
Speaking of teams that show up none of the time, the Cleveland Browns, right now, one of the many problems for fantasy is this messy committee backfield. Bob, who are you targeting, if anyone, at their cost out of this backfield?
Duke Johnson. Yeah. We've had the same conversation, except the name was Ty Montgomery. I mean, look, when you have 2 guys that are splitting one role, which looks like, or competing for the similar carries, which is Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb, then you look for the guy, the different. One of these things is not like the others. Duke Johnson is not like the others. They also paid him. They paid Hyde too, but they also, extended Duke Johnson. We know what he's capable of as a receiver. Todd Haley, a very pass-heavy, pass-happy coordinator, not afraid to use his receiving assets out of the backfield. So yeah, Duke Johnson would be in fact, I don't think I have any shares in anything of Nick Chubb or Carlos Hyde. I think my only shares of this backfield are Duke Johnson.
It's a mess for certain. But look, Carlos Hyde, 240 carries, 938 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. He's only 26. He was a top 10 running back in PPR format. So it's a mess, needless to say.
And they paid him good money. I mean, they didn't pay him chump change. He's up in that $6 million range at least this year. So I know my friend Matt Waldman, we mentioned him with Matt Harmon. I mean, he authored the rookie scouting portfolio. He thinks Nick Chubb in terms of talent is every bit as good as Saquon Barkley. So,
I read that.
So that's a concern, if you're looking to get shares. And I've heard some of the local observers maybe speculate on a true three-way split where maybe Chubb gets the majority of the work between the tackles, but Hyde comes in goal line situations where maybe a trusted veteran is the guy you want in there, and Duke Johnson doing the Duke Johnson thing. So it is, that's for me, that kind of precludes me from investing heavily, a dynasty aside in Chubb, but in redraft in either of those two.
Little ambiguity with Hyde and Chubb, but it seems like Duke Johnson has a solidified role at 24. They just paid him as well. And I think, and I'll say this week in, week out, every team kind of yearns for a Duke Johnson to line him up. He's your pass catching back. And I finished RB12 last year in PPR. I think he's a 70 reception running back. So Johnson, to me, I'm the most confident about. But it's interesting. We know Chubb's had the knee problems, and we've seen success and volume out of Carlos Hyde. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. It is messy, though, Kyle.
All right, speaking of ambiguity, a sponsor of the show, actually, Justin brought them on early on with DraftKings as a sponsor of the show. One of his favorite words, ambiguity. Speaking of ambiguity, we've got Tyrod Taylor. They're adamant that he is the current starter. But, Bob, how long do you think this lasts, Tyrod Taylor being the starter, and how does that impact how you view this team for fantasy?
As long as they're winning, or winning some games, or winning not 0 games. I mean, ideally, they would like Baker Mayfield to sit out the whole year and watch from the sidelines, learn how to read defenses, learn all the things that a rookie quarterback. This just in, the Browns' history of starting these first-round picks at quarterback has not been good, right? I mean,
name 15 times that's happened. All right,
I could probably name 10 in the last 2 years that they've taken. So that's I think that's part of the issue. I will note that if you look at Tyrod Taylor is a bridge quarterback to whatever degree he is at. The Bills' new coaching staff was pretty quick to jump off the bridge last year, at least until they saw how cold the Nathan Peterman water was against the Chargers. But that's the thing. I think it's going to depend on the success of the offense, and that's going to be something that's going to be hard to gauge, which makes it very hard to count on Taylor, as a fantasy asset. I do think he fits some of the talent around him, assuming all the talent is there. We saw last year, we talked to Josh Hermsmeyer, and he said he doesn't have a great depth of target. He really does. He has a big arm. The offense didn't make that possible last year because he didn't have any receiving core, or at least probably the worst receiving core in the NFL last year in Buffalo. He does not have that this year, assuming all the pieces are intact. He has a pretty damn good receiving core. So look, I think he can be serviceable, and what I'm concerned about, the things that should concern fantasy owners, is can he fuel the fantasy fires of the guys like Josh Gordon, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Duke Johnson, those guys that we are counting on. And I would suggest if you look back to like maybe Sammy Watkins' really super run in 2015, Tyrod Taylor was airing it out, hitting them deep, making big plays, half of that great connection in a 9-game stretch when Sammy Watkins was damn near unstoppable. So I think that's got to be encouraging for those invested in the wide receivers there.
Touche. Look, we can talk about the Cleveland Browns for an hour. I think there's a lot of appeal there.
Justin, you do know they're 1-31 in the past 32 games. Let's limit that to less than an hour.
You know what you're getting out of Tyrod Taylor? I think he's safe. I think he could run for 500 yards, like you said. But as long as they're winning, that's how long he's going to be in there. Today, Baker Mayfield just got that fat check. I think they crushed the draft. Grabbing Chubb and Antonio Callaway round 4's had some character issues, but a lot of people like Callaway as from a talent standpoint, top 3 or 4 wide receiver in this draft. Culminate that with a Josh Gordon, who's a fantasy liability in my opinion, but people gravitate towards sexy this time of year. And you got a stud in Landry, who they gave a blank check to, who's going to catch 90 passes, and we still don't know what the hell Corey Coleman is, who is a top 3 wide receiver out of his class. So there's a lot of, I have a lot of optimism for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, it's tough to say that, but from the names that I just mentioned on offense alone, and David Njoku, who's a freak of a tight end, look, they should score some points. I mean, they should be able to put the ball into the end zone. So, but the question is, they went with Mayfield. That was kind of a last minute decision. That there was something about Baker Mayfield that separated himself from the rest of these quarterbacks. He might have it from a confidence standpoint. But I don't think there's a lot of question marks about what Tyrod Taylor is at this point, and he's pretty safe. He's not going to knock your socks off, but as long as the Cleveland Browns are winning, I think Tyrod Taylor is going to be the quarterback for the Browns.
All right, Bob, before we leave Cleveland, give me your take, because we already know Justin's, Josh Gordon or Jarvis Landry.
I've been drafting Landry, but until today I drafted Josh Gordon because he dropped into the 5th round in the USA Today draft I did today. So that was look, again, this is, you're going to find this out as we get closer to summer when something happens that causes uncertainty, creates doubt, and hence creates value. I'm not the guy who's running away from that. I'm the guy who's running towards that. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, I'm not doing that just say, oh, look, I'm going to get Josh Gordon. I'm going to say, okay, Josh Gordon's a good value, but I need to keep in mind that, maybe there are issues with him that I need to be prepared to deal with, like that maybe he's not going to play. Maybe he's going to, miss some time, whatever. Those things you bake into the cake. You calculate them in, just like you do with Tyler Eifert, just like you do with Jordan Reed, just like you do with pretty much every player. You just have to do it to lesser degrees with most of them. So I just, these are the things I'm looking for. I'm looking for situations, drama, angst, all these things that create value. And for me, Josh Gordon is a ton of that right now. His price had risen higher than I wanted to pay. So that's why I was getting more Landry. But as that price comes down, if they swap spots, I didn't, if you didn't see it today, when the day the pod went out, Mary Kay Cabot wrote a preview for training camp. She thinks the Browns seem pretty solid that Gordon's going to be ready, be available. The uncertainty there comes from one statement by an NFL spokesman basically saying, we'll address it at the appropriate time. And we're all going, oh, geez, what the hell is there to address? I mean, right. So there is some mystery there, and that's what's going to create the uncertainty. She also, by the way, mentioned that Landry is going to play the outside as opposed to the slot, and hence will be doing more deep routes. And, again, I think that plays into something that Taylor has been good at in the past. So I think, I think there's a good price for both of them. Right now, I think Landry is obviously the safer play, but if Gordon's price keeps dropping, you're going to have to hold me back. I want some.
What did I make a bet with Brad Evans on the pod about Gordon and Mahomes? I'm just trying to figure out what it is now with Gordon. I feel a lot more I think it was top 15, I want to say. Let's go with top 12, he said.
Yeah, I believe it was 20. I believe you said 20 large on top 15.
That feels pretty good tonight.
We know the high end, we know the low end, and we know the dangers associated. So just when you're drafting, have a plan in place. Look, I'm going to have to draft Josh Gordon. Maybe that means an extra guy at the position. Maybe I have to go with more of an upside guy. Or maybe if I draft him a little early, I need a steady Eddie. I need a Golden Tate, a 90 catch guy a year or something. You have to make these calculations as you go into your draft. If you're going to if you're considering drafting Gordon, just have a plan in place.
Mm-hmm. All right. That brings us to our final team on this stop, Pittsburgh. And Bob, I think it's getting to the point where it's Antonio Brown is the undisputed wide receiver 1 this year, like he was last year, many years before, and maybe many years to come. I'll let you sun me on this one, though. Can he ever reach the GOAT status?
Probably not, because Jerry Rice has pretty much claimed ownership of that in perpetuity, I'm guessing. Yep. Look, Brown is a fantastic player, and I think different eras yield different results. And part of, what's working in Brown's favor is the NFL is a much pass happier league than it ever was in the past. Although San Francisco certainly, was a leader, in bringing the league in the direction it is with that West Coast offense Bill Walsh created. So, look, I mean, the greatest of all time, there can only be one. And right now it's Jerry Rice. We'll see how this unfolds for Antonio Brown. It would take a significant stretch of the same production he's having now for me to put him in that conversation. But right now, he's the best receiver in the NFL. There's no doubt about it.
Justin, we've had news now break in the past few days that Le'Veon Bell will be absent from training camp. Does this have you devaluing him at all? Do you think he starts slowly again like he did last year? Does this change your ranking of him at all?
He's top 3. I think the big 4 with Gurley, Zeke, DJ, and Bell. It's a little concerning. Todd Gurley got paid. There's some animosity right now. There is a little bit of animosity. The man wants to get paid. He's 26. Le'Veon Bell is on the field as much as anybody. He's a fantastic blocker. We love that he lives on the field. He's an 89. He's got some LT in him. He's got some LaDainian Tomlinson in him, and that's a special player. He had over 400 touches last season. So we'll see how this shakes out. I'm leaning towards Zeke. I think what Zeke did in 10 games last season was, this kid has got a ceiling as high as anybody's, and Gurley maybe, is the Todd Gurley that we thought the Rams were getting out of Georgia a little bit. But, push comes to shove, despite the Le'Veon Bell contractual stuff, I could care less, and I don't really want to be in a spot to pick Gurley, Bell, or Zeke. I kind of like the middle of the draft or later in drafts, or DJ, I should say. We don't know a ton about DJ. I'm fine with that.
No, we actually do.
So, well, we do, and we know it was his arm. We know what he did in 2016, but it's A, B, C, and D. His preference at that point. And the more and more I think about it, it's Zeke Elliott is RB1 for me. But I can't tell you no against Le'Veon Bell. I think they're going to make him happy, and they should. But he's 26, and he's the older of the 4. Although DJ is 26 as well.
The Steelers are not going to make him happy. Someone will maybe make him happier than he is now. The problem for him is Mike Tomlin, and it's not a problem. Maybe it was a problem for Le'Veon Bell, but it's not a problem for fantasy owners. You think back throughout Mike Tomlin's history, go back to the Willie Parker when it was pretty clear Willie Parker was the end of the line. What did Mike Tomlin do? Run the wheels. Told us he was going to run the wheels off him, and did run the wheels off him. Let's look at Le'Veon Bell last year down the stretch from, let's say, week 10 on. Week 10, 17 carries, but that beyond that, 28, 23, 29, 38, 23, week 16, 20 carries, on top of the receptions, that go with those, with what he does. He's going to be heavily used. You know that. I think, beyond this year, there's issues. Mike Dempsey, my Sirius co-host, reminded he's, got already, 600 touches in his career, and he's 2 years older than like Gurley and these other guys. So, I think that's going to be a problem for him getting the money he wants, but I don't care. He's going to play this year for $15 million. Maybe he has a slow start, and when I need him most, he is going to have the ball in his hands, and there's not a lot of doubt assuming that he's locked in upright position. So I think you can make a strong case for him this year, and there's some uncertainty beyond that, but I don't care right now. I'm worried about this year.
Do you have, as far as Gurley, Zeke, DJ, and Lev, are you cool with any of those guys being?
Yeah, I could live with any of them. I certainly could. My personal ranking is Gurley, Bell, Johnson, and Zeke. And that's basically, a PPR ranking. Maybe that said, is it really? David Johnson has shown he's a capable touchdown scorer. You look at the offensive coordinator comes in there, Mike McCoy, a pass-heavy coordinator himself. David Johnson, essentially, like Le'Veon Bell, the number 2 receiver on his team. Yeah. So, I think those situations, and Zeke Elliott just a little less, multidimensional, and which is a nice way of saying not as versatile. And look, he's great. He's fantastic. We're splitting hairs here, right? Because that's what we do in fantasy football between 4 fantastic running backs. So, I'd be fine playing with any of them. All that said, I'm fine picking 5th overall and getting Antonio Brown, the current GOAT.
Yeah.
Justin,
Yep.
Justin, we had Matt Harmon on, and he already spread the knowledge about Juju, so I think I can bring you to this. Is there another receiving option in maybe James Washington or a tight end that you see breaking out here? Or is it AB, maybe a fade of Juju, and Bell as the receivers?
Yeah, it's AB and Bell for me. And I think Juju, 79 targets last season. He caught 58 of those 79. I think it's, 73.4 target success rate. You're paying a little bit of a premium for Juju.
Right. Maybe we saw his ceiling, right?
He's 21 years old. He's animated. This is a guy, Todd Haley is gone. He's in that range where, do you like Corey Davis or do you like Juju? And I think I lean Corey Davis a little bit. Do you like Michael Crabtree or Brandon? Some of these wide receivers or Devin Funchess, I don't know that Juju is going to have 58 receptions, over 900 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Is Ben Roethlisberger? There's some people that think that Ben Roethlisberger might, the wheels are falling off him. AB is going to be AB. I think it's AB and Lev. The more I think about it, I like Juju. I think there's going to be weeks we're going to like him in DFS. I am skeptical in terms of season long at his cost.
Juju Smith-Schuster going locked in about the middle of the 4th round. Guys going in that same range. Golden Tate, 4 straight years of 90-plus catches.
Yep.
Alshon Jeffrey going after him. Marvin Jones going after him. Jarvis Landry going after him. Michael Crabtree going after him. Corey Davis, a full 2 rounds after him.
It's crazy.
Julian Edelman, a full 2.5 rounds. So I think we're paying a premium for not a lot of proof. And again, it's kind of like Arizona. One of the things I like about Arizona is the same things I like about Pittsburgh. You have 2 guys that are locked in as the primary weapons, in Fitzgerald and Johnson, Arizona, and obviously Brown and Bell. And, I'm not averse to Smith-Schuster. I think he's a great player. I just think that price is not what I'm looking to pay.
Yeah. On no day am I going to draft Juju in front of a Golden Tate or a Jarvis Landry. It's just not, I just can't see it happening, at all. So it's easy. He's a fade for me.
All right, Bob. The Steelers have Antonio Brown, the number 1 receiver right now. They have an argument for the number 1 running back, who, because of his pass catching, is really what's putting him there, putting him over the top of these other guys. You just listed the cost of Juju. James Washington, they spent high draft capital on, in addition to him being a target of dynasty players. All of this is to say that everyone loves his receivers, his running back, and his tight ends are even sleepers. How does this not really manifest itself in Roethlisberger having upwards of a career year?
It's kind of like the conversation we have about Eli Manning. If all these players are going to be phenomenally great players, it's going to bode well for Big Ben. And look, Ben's a serviceable player. He has huge games, great best ball player, right? Going to have those 5 TD games every now and again. Sometimes he'll do them back to back. Mm-hmm. So I think he is great. There is some inconsistency there. There'll be up and down weeks, but on the whole, I think where you're drafting him right now, I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is an unreasonable play. I'm going to pull up this week's ADP and just see where he's at, just so I'm not talking. Yeah, he's outside. I'm drafting Ben Roethlisberger ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo, who's going ahead of him. I think he's right down there. I think he's perfectly priced, just right outside that top 10. And I love landing guys like him and Phillip Rivers after people are taking.
All right, I think that can bring us to a close. If you want your Football Diehards pod updates, you can follow Bob at Football Diehards, Justin at Just Lonero, and myself at FF Kyle the Kid. Thanks for tuning in.